No men's basketball game this weekend means that it's time for a Monday mailbag. Is RJ Davis going to stick around for one more year? Could Elliot Cadeau be the ACC Freshman of the Year? We'll have the answers to that and more.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Monday, December 11th, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and I want to thank you for making our show your first listen or watch to get your team every day. This episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Well, coming up on the show today, like I said, it is going to be an entire mailbag episode. We got 9 questions. We're going to tackle 3 per segment today. And the majority of these, by the way, have come from the Locked On Tar Heels Discord channel where we're hanging out all the time, having great conversations. Come on, join the community. It's awesome. The link is in the show notes. By the way, we're also not doing a weekend whip around this weekend. Literally, the only action is the women's basketball game up in Connecticut against UConn. I'm actually recording before that happened. And so as you listen to or watch this, you'll already know what happened. As I watch it back on Monday, I'll already know what happened. But right now, we don't. We expect a good battle and a great test for the ladies up in New England, where I would not want to be right now because I'm sure it's freezing cold. All right, let's get right into this mailbag episode. I've tried to group these in ways that make most sense. So we've got several men's basketball questions out of the gate. So let's dive right into it. Number 1, this is from Teflon Chef on our Discord. Teflon Chef, a very active member of the group. Great. In fact, I think we got a couple questions today from Teflon Chef. So thank you for these. In fact, both our first 2, actually, our entire first segment, looking at it, is from Teflon Chef. So this is this segment brought to you by Teflon Chef. All right, number 1 question. Do you think RJ will return for a 5th season? For those of you who might not be aware, because of how the 2020-21 season was messed up because of COVID, I know like it might not make sense. You're like, hey, I thought the 1920 season was the one that was messed up by COVID. Well, sure, the end of it was, but the entirety of that next season was messed up. So the NCAA granted an extra year of eligibility to anyone that was a freshman that year and anyone that was in and above that was in college that year. And so there might be the question like, well, RJ wasn't even in college when things were canceled. True, but he was a freshman that next season. So this is the last class, the class that are seniors right now. So this is like RJ Davis, Caleb Love. That whole class is the last class that has the opportunity to utilize that 5th year of eligibility. So that's where this question comes from. To answer this question, will he return for a 5th season? There's the, do I want it? Do I think it? Will he actually? There's all those kinds of answers we got to get to. Ultimately, this is a conversation about RJ's desires and wishes and what he values most. For example, is there more team success he wants to try to get to? Is there more individual success he wants to try to get to? Maybe, this year goes pretty well and Carolina gets knocked off in the Elite 8. And he's like, man, I'd love one more run at another Final Four, whatever it may be. Those kind of things. Maybe it's, things he's learning about the NBA process. And it's like, man, I need one more year to come back and do those kind of things. Well, here's part of the answer as well. In this NIL era, it's infinitely more complicated because of a player's ability to earn a lot of money as a college basketball player. And the reason I say that is because before NIL was a thing, we were getting to the point where even guys that were second round players were leaving school so that they could go ahead and start their professional career and start making money. So whether it was like, even if a player was like, I'm going to land in the G League or I'm going to be overseas, I'm not going to be in the NBA, they would still go so that they could make money. Now, part of the calculus is, well, for Armando Bacot, let's say a big part of the reason he came back, I'm not the type of player with my skill set that the NBA cherishes or values right now. So I am probably going to be able to make more money playing for the North Carolina Tar Heels for a 5th year than I would have if I were to be playing overseas or in the G League. Moreover, I just love college and I want to stick around and get a master's degree and do these kind of things. So I'm going to do it. It's like those kind of questions. What matters more to RJ? And similarly to Armando, RJ is not currently popping up on NBA big boards or mock drafts or things of that nature. Now, his stock is rising. Somebody had pointed out to me the other day an On3 article where RJ was amongst the 10 highest stock risers in NBA value. And that doesn't mean that he's a projected top 10 pick. That's not what that says. Somebody was suggesting that. And I just want to make sure we understand that. Just that he is, by On3, I can't even remember who wrote that article, looked at as someone that's rising in the rankings. Even still, RJ is not popping up on these boards. So is it a situation with RJ where he's like, I love Carolina. I love being a Tar Heel. Those of you who have already graduated college know this like I do. There is not another time in your life like there is in college. So why not take advantage of it one more time if you can? If you could stick around and get a master's degree or whatever it is, awesome. The NBA, I feel like we're starting to see a few more kind of undersized guards similar to RJ, but it's the exception rather than the rule. So in terms of basketball, it could make sense for RJ to come back. In terms of finances, it could make sense for RJ to come back. It's ultimately about what he wants to do. Has he done everything he wants to do and is just like, I'm just ready? Awesome. More power to you. End of the day, my answer, I think he's going to follow in Armando's footsteps and come back. Now, there have been comments he's made that make us think that he might not. And if so, that wouldn't shock me either. And so there's really no way to know. Now, with the year he's having, there might not be another opportunity where his stock is as high as it could possibly be. And if so, you got to go, like for his own good. So we'll wait and see on all of that. But ultimately, I'll say yes. Of course, I could be dead wrong, but that's my answer. Second question in today's mailbag. Can Elliot Cadeau win the ACC Freshman of the Year? Who would be his best competition? Well, the most important word in this question is, can Elliot win? First off, yes, he can. Absolutely. There's no reason to think that he couldn't. But right now, I would not say he's in the lead for that. Let me give you his numbers as we sit here currently before the Kentucky game this coming Saturday. 7.1 points, 23.7 minutes. Obviously not great yet from the 3-point line or the free throw line. 27% from three, 54.8% from the free throw line. But his field goal percentage overall is good for a guard, 44.9%. He's getting 4.1 assists. That's 7th in the ACC, 2nd amongst freshmen in the ACC, and just 1.3 turnovers a game. Again, for a freshman, that's good. If he were to win this, his scoring, his assists, his percentages from threes and frees would both need to go up. In terms of his competition, in a typical year, you would assume it is a Duke freshman, just because they reload and utilize freshmen every year. But so much of these kind of awards are about productivity and opportunity. Because of everyone that Duke had come back this year, there's not as much opportunity as there typically is for freshmen to succeed. That said, Jared McCain is in the starting lineup for Duke. He's a great shooter. He's started every game. Right now, he's averaging 9.1 points, 24.6 minutes. He's shooting 41% from three on 4.3 attempts a game. That's really good. 83% from the free throw line, 4.3 rebounds, 1.9 assists. So if there's a Duke freshman, he would be the leading candidate for it. There's also got like Caleb Foster might be an option from Duke. I don't think he would win it. And in terms of other Duke freshmen, TJ Power, Sean Stewart aren't getting enough run. Let me give you two other names that are two of the most productive freshmen in the conference. One whom I think won't win it, and the other who I think actually is, at least right now, is the front runner. One is Marcus Burton at Notre Dame. He's a 5'11 guard. Talk about diminutive guards. 15.7 points a game. That's 15th in the conference, first amongst freshmen. 3.4 boards, 3.7 assists, 85.7% from the free throw line. But he's not a good field goal shooter, and is averaging 4 turnovers a game. Also, he plays for Notre Dame. Again, that's Marcus Burton. So he's having a great freshman year. But because of some of those numbers and because of lack of team success, I don't think he has a shot of it. Let me end with who I think is the front runner right now, and that's Pittsburgh, actually a Pitt player. Yes, Carlton Carrington. If you don't know his name, if you haven't seen him play, you need to check out a Pitt game. Carolina will play them early in January, so get ready for that. Carrington is a 6'5" guard, 14.9 points per game. That's 20th in the ACC and second amongst freshmen. But he's getting, in addition to almost 15 points a game, 5.1 boards a game and 6.1 assists per game. That's number one in the ACC in terms of assists, not amongst freshmen. Anybody. He is the leading assister in the entire ACC and just 1.9 turnovers per game, shooting 34.8% from three, 78.6% from the free throw line. Neither of those numbers are like elite, but they're all good. And so they wouldn't be like, I don't know. He's 9th in the conference in win shares. All 8 above him are all upperclassmen whose names you would know and be like, oh yeah, he's a dude. And another factor in it with Carrington, he's a projected first-round draft pick. And in fact, I've seen him as high as the late lottery. So right now, he would be my pick to win. All right, final question of segment 1. How big of an influence will a successful season be for 2025 recruiting? This is the junior class currently in high school, 2025. And again, this one was also from Teflon Chef. This is a great question and one that has a multitude of factors to it. The thing with recruiting is that there's always a spin that you can put in your favor. For example, if Carolina does have a fully successful 23-24 season, the spin is, look at how much success we're having. Come be part of this thing. It's going really, really well. If there's a lack of success, but you have a pretty good year, you say, man, we were just right there, but we barely missed out. You're the missing piece, and we need you to come be part of this. If you have a terrible year, it's, hey, look, things did not go well this year, and we need a dude. You could be that dude to help us get this thing turned, right? Like, there's always a sell. There's always a pitch that you can make. In this case, I believe that there are a number of recruits, and I mean this both in terms of high school recruiting and transfer portal recruiting, looking to see how much success Carolina has in year 3 under Coach Davis. Because in some ways, we got to take the whole of Coach Davis's tenure so far, looking at, hey, not a great second year. First year, it was okay. And there was a great run at the end. So I want to see what this is now that it's much more Coach Davis's team. I think there are players looking to see that, especially high school players. Transfer players have seen the success. And so they know, regardless of season success, they know that they will be utilized well. When you look at guys like Brady, Manek, when you look at guys like Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan, for example, and last year, Pete Nance, and so a successful season is certainly not going to hurt, right? Especially with these elite players that Carolina is going after in 25, seeing that on-court success is going to be a win. But interestingly, on-court success does seem to have less of an overall impact than you might expect. Like, players aren't often turned off by, oh, things didn't go well. As things were going bad last year, other Tar Heels, the current 24 commits reaffirmed their commitment to the program. And so it's much more about fit and opportunity. Are there minutes for me in this transfer portal era where I could go somewhere else? That's a bigger factor. How a coach is going to use you or highlight you so that, you can be seen. Your certain players' desire to play for a coach or program. Proximity to where you live, or maybe you want to get away and go somewhere else. Like, these things, to me, I've seen be a bigger factor than on-court success. So that's kind of the answer to that question. Now, again, it is by no ways a negative. And so on-court success, hey, that's a big thumbs up. Let's make it happen. Now, moving on, conference realignment has come up yet again. Several questions, all pertaining to conference realignment, including, will the ACC snub hurt our recruiting, moving from basketball to football recruiting? And would the ability to get Notre Dame into the ACC ultimately help things? Good question there. We're going to talk about those in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your number one ride or die alive. eBay Motors has got everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, and LED headlights, whatever you're into, speed, power, style, eBay Motors has got it all. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you're always going to find what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, this part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's get into our second segment of mailbag questions today. And this next one comes from Andrew Williamson in an email. Thanks so much, Andrew, for your question. He says, with FSU being left out of the CFP as an undefeated ACC champion, I can't help but wonder about the thought process of an elite kid considering an ACC school, knowing that your team can go undefeated, win a conference championship, but still fall short of being allowed to play significant games late in the season. I understand that expanding the field under a new format will help, but I'm not sure if it corrects an SEC Big Ten advantage. That's a great question. In your opinion, how does it impact UNC recruiting moving forward? Do you feel it may be a factor, specifically with transfer portal recruitment of a player with 1 or 2 years of eligibility? Andrew, this is a great question. Very fair, very valid. And I'm sure it would give at least some pause to the elite of the elite student athletes. That said, this is a one-off and a unique situation. We've seen the ACC be rewarded in the CFP over and above. Like typically it's been the Pac-12 that's kind of got the short end of the stick. And obviously they're out now. Now that's only a factor moving forward, but so is expansion, as Andrew, you mentioned in your question. I do firmly believe that were Jordan Travis he's alive, if he was healthy, that FSU would be in this game. But as you kind of alluded to, I also believe that was FSU an SEC or a Big Ten school, they would have been given the benefit of the doubt, and they would be one of the 4 teams in and Alabama out. So there is something to that is part of the calculus of a young man deciding what he wants to do. But again, as you said, because of expansion, it is a moot point. The ACC champion is going to get in, assuming the ACC continues to exist in the way that it currently is. That side of it is not something to correct. Like the SEC Big Ten advantage, specifically the finances, is the biggest thing with their new media packages. And so that expansion, though, is not going to correct that bias, right? Like if there was an ACC at large and an SEC at large, we know who's getting that call. So it's something that currently ACC, Big 12, and Pac-12 all have to deal with. It's not just us. And which is part of why I think it would make sense. There's been some rumors of maybe some ACC, Big 12 playing well together or something of that nature. I think that would make a big difference. But another thing is when it comes to recruiting, North Carolina as a state, Virginia as a state is such a fertile recruiting ground that you're not going to start losing those just because of this. I do not believe so with that. Ultimately, yes, I think this snub is not a nothing burger, but I don't think that it is a major, like, no, I'm not going to North Carolina because of what's happened to the ACC. I do believe that it is just a coincidental one-off thing, even while the ACC, yes, is valued at a lesser degree than the SEC or Big Ten. We got to recognize that. All right. Our next question is also from Andrew Williamson in an email. He says, I believe that we still hang banners for ACC championships. If we were to move to another conference, would we remove banners pertaining to our time in the ACC? And as a follow-up, in your opinion, do you feel that if we should or should not remove said banners? So 2 parts to this. Would Carolina remove them? And do I think they should remove them? Number 1, if Carolina moved to a different conference or if they created a whole new one, I do not believe that they would remove the banners. It is the ACC and its role at Carolina is such a critical lifeblood of what North Carolina is and has been. And so I think, as you know, I mean, look at all the jerseys. That's an honor and a heritage to what Carolina is and has been, in the same way that the ACC would always be part of the lifeblood of the Tar Heels, even in a new conference. Now, there might come a day decades down the road when things get too crowded in the rafters and maybe you have to consolidate to, like, here's a bunch of years all on one banner or something of that nature. I could see that being a thing, but I don't believe they would bring down ACC banners unless there was some kind of contractual reason that they had to, which I don't think they would allow to become part of a contract, honestly. Now, and secondly, my opinion you asked for, no, I agree. I do not think Carolina should bring them down. I think that would be to forsake what's done and been in the past, in the same way, like, for example, God forbid my wife should ever die and I were to one day remarry. Again, this is a terrible scenario that would play out. I would want to have things that reminded me of that past life, because it's a major part of who I am in a healthy way, not in any sort of negative way. You know what I mean? So I would feel the same. I want future generations to know about, to ask about the ACC and what it was. All right, final question of this section. This comes from our guy, Jason Moore, in the Discord. Jason, thanks so much. He says, is there any conceivable scenario where Notre Dame could come into the ACC to help save the conference long term? Would that shore things up? What would those financial terms have to look like to make both sides happy if possible? Whew, I love this consideration, Jason. This is a great question. Yes, there are conceivable, to use your word, scenarios, but I just never see it happening as long as the status quo remains what it is now. And here's what I mean. It would be, from the conference standpoint, from an ACC standpoint, a phenomenal get, right? Like, I know that Notre Dame, at least in terms of on field, like thinking about the football, because that's what's going to drive these decisions, is not what it once was. But because of their standing, because of their independent nature, they continue to get the benefit of the doubt over and over and over again. Now, I think they're trending up under Marcus Freeman, and so that's a win. So definitely, yes, I think getting Notre Dame would shore up the conference to get them as a football school, as we do in multiple other sports. The problem, as I see it, is that there's currently no incentive to move into a conference on the positive side, nor right now is there any punishment or, you know, things they wouldn't be privy to for staying independent on the negative side. And so there's no reason positively, right? There's no reward for it, but there's also no repercussions currently for staying independent. So why make a change if you don't need to, is what I would be saying if I were Notre Dame. Now, in terms of the financial terms, what would it have to look like to make both sides happy? Jason, I think that's the rub, is doing things that would make both sides happy. I think any incentives that Notre Dame would get to make them want to come would be too far for the ACC. And anything that would make the ACC happy, I don't think would be a far enough thing for Notre Dame. So I don't see them being able to see eye to eye on that. Now, maybe if it gets to a point, like, I think the only thing that would move Notre Dame is the negative repercussions of, like, oh, if we're not in a conference, we're going to get left out in the cold. So let's imagine a world where we get to 3, maybe 4 super conferences, which might be closer than we actually see it is. And no one outside of that structure has a seat at the table. That would force a move to me. Like, if we're going to be left out of postseason because we're not in a conference, then we got to make the move. But on the, like, basically you'd have to beat NBC's deal with Notre Dame. You'd have to match that exclusivity that they have right now for home games. And I just don't see the ACC thinking Notre Dame mattered that much to go after it and make a deal, unless it was just like, we're dead in the water without it. But even then, how do you get the ACC presidents and ADs to be on board with that? I don't know that they would be. So I just simply don't ever see there being enough financial terms, balance, or incentives for Notre Dame to want to move. I think the only reason to do it would be to stave off being left out of something. Now, that might happen, but it's not yet. And until that day, I don't see him moving. All right. Final segment of questions. Are we going to have to put an asterisk on all these fifth-year players and what they're doing and their stats and records? And where does Omarion Hampton rank in terms of recent running back awesomeness at Carolina? We're going to have those conversations in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Listen, Prize Picks is a great way to test your skills this season in a very exciting way in daily fantasy sports. If you got the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. It's a simple way to play. Just make your picks, submit them. You can do all of that in less than a minute. Plus, they've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's all part of what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Just you against the numbers, and then you pick more or less than the given stat for 2 to 6 players. For example, tonight, Kobe White, our guy, is playing against the Bucks, and his points are set at more or less than 19.5. Let's go more. You know you want to. And if you want to get in on that action, go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, our next question comes to us from Klaus Balsvig, the Danish Tar Heel, self-proclaimed on a Twitter or X DM. And he says, could you please talk a little about how people see these record-breaking things surrounding not just Armando Bacot, but I suppose all quote-unquote super seniors out there? Isn't it a bit unfair to the record holders in the history books if he gets to shatter record after record using this fifth year? With your knowledge, what do people say on this issue? Wouldn't it be more fair if his numbers from the COVID year were replaced with his stats from this year, his fifth year? Interesting question there. So, Klaus, yes, obviously this is unfair in terms of record books of having an extra year, certainly. Now, specifically with Armando, he set the rebounding record and the double-double record in 4 years. So we don't have to worry about that. You know what I mean? Anything RJ Davis finishes off after this year, if he maintains his hold on #1 career free throw shooter, great. That's 4 years. You don't even have to think about it. But there certainly are other records from other players and Armando himself that will either be new records or records like the rebounding record that he'll just put out of reach because of this fifth year. And we have to reckon with that. I don't believe we're going to see any official asterisks in the record books. But people will put verbal asterisks on some of these records in conversation. Reason being is that there's always going to be an inequity in terms of games played or years played, you know, when freshmen weren't allowed to play, or number of games played now is so much more than it was previously. And so because of things like that, putting an asterisk on it now, when who knows, maybe 10 years from now, players are getting 5 years of eligibility on the regular, right? I don't know what things are going to be long-term. And so that means we can't legislate. That's what I'm looking for. We can't legislate those changes right now. Like what if there comes a day in time when 5 years is the norm? Then not only would we not want an asterisk on Bacot and other fifth year guys, we'd want to have those numbers. So it is what it is. Now, Klaus, to your last suggestion, I love this idea. It's not going to happen, but in theory, like when we're having debates, it's a great way to go about it. So Klaus's idea is basically, what if we could take Armando Bacot's numbers from this season and put them over his stats from like 2020, 21, the COVID affected year. Obviously, it's not apples to apples, but it's a good way to look at a more fair 4-year progression for player or 4 years of opportunity. And I know even with that, there's differences, because that's basically taking Mondo as a freshman, junior, senior, and super senior rather than freshman. So again, there's always going to be inequity in that. So I love this suggestion, Klaus. And ultimately, no, I don't think there will be official asterisks, but certainly in conversation there will be. Next one comes to us from our guy, Jason Moore again. This is a Twitter DM. He says, where does Omarion Hampton rank in recent history of UNC running backs? I don't think he gets nearly enough touches, amen and amen, but is still putting up huge numbers. This is a great question from Jason. Let's say this. His total rushing yards, Omarion, this season, even before the bowl game, we haven't played that yet. He ranks third in Carolina history in single season rushing yards. He's got 1442. Just above him is Elijah Hood from 2015, who had 1443. So he needs just 22 yards to move into second in a single season all time. That's what Omarion's doing just this year. Probably won't touch Don McCauley's single season record, which is 1,720 yards. Comparative to some other recent running backs, to Jason's question, Michael Carter, I think, is probably the guy we look to recently. He's got seasons that were the 2020 season. He was 8th in single season Carolina history, and that's while sharing the backfield with Javonte Williams, who was 13th that year. The season before, Michael Carter was 19th in Carolina history. And so, 31st in Carolina single season history, had 1,003 yards. So, that's ridiculous. Ty Chandler back in 21 had 1,092. Gio back in 2011 had 1,253 yards. 2012, he was on this, just these are some of the recent guys. And this year's rushing numbers from Omarion beat them all. And this is just his second year. So this is going to be the 32nd time a Carolina running back has ever eclipsed 1,000 yards in a single season, and just the 8th time in the 2000s. That's pretty crazy. He's going to finish this year top 10 in single season Carolina history in yards per carry. He's already 6th in a single season in rushing touchdowns, could bump that up in the bowl game. So the key to where is he ultimately is going to be what happens next year, because this has been a great single season. We saw flashes of it last year. How does Omarion build on this next year? You've seen other running backs transfer out. That tells you a lot about what Carolina expects out of Omarion again next season, hopefully, right? The plan is he'll be back. We'll wait to see. And I don't mean that in terms of draft. He can't yet. He's just a sophomore. But in terms of transferring, we wait to see on that. So Omarion has a chance to be a legacy-setting running back at Carolina. Let's say he finishes with 1,500-ish yards again next year. That would put him in the range of 5th in Carolina history in terms of rushing yards in total. But that's just in 3 years. Everyone that is top 5 currently all played 4 seasons at Carolina. So this is telling you all you need to know. Comparatively to other recent running backs, Omarion is trumping them all, at least in terms of on-field success and numbers and stats. In terms of draft stuff, I think he's going to be right up there. He is a powerful between the tackles kind of runner. His passing game, I think, is growing to where I think he could be a 3-down back in the NFL. And we've seen these guys that have come just before him. They are having success in the NFL. Javonte, Michael Carter. I know he just isn't a Jet anymore, but I forget who just picked him up. Forgive me. But Ty Chandler is getting run in the NFL. And all of these guys, he's eclipsed Omarion. And so I expect him to go down. So to answer the question, it's not just recent history. In terms of all of Carolina running back history, Omarion is doing absolute work. And were it not for Drake right now, I think we would have been Omarion would be the talk, the dude, the one everyone would be drooling over. And so assuming Omarion Hampton is back next year, it's one of those soak in every second of it, because it is a special moment in Carolina football history. All right, our last question today. We got to go quick here. This is back, another one from Teflon Chef on Discord. What if the football team, this by the way was earlier in the football season, what if the football team finishes 8-4, Nostradamus over here, and we lose valuable players to the transfer portal? Do the powers that be make crucial changes to the coaching staff? Woof. Well, unfortunately, this is the reality. Carolina did finish the regular season 8-4. They have started losing some valuable players to the transfer portal, which, let's say about the transfer portal, that's just the way things go in this day and age. that you got to deal with. Now, I think there would be fewer and will enter the portal with a little bit more success because you've seen this back-to-back seasons now. So to me, yes, there are going to need to be at least some level of changes made to the staff. You can't finish the way you have each of the past 2 years and expect things to stay the way they are. Expect the status quo. And I know there was a few coaching changes made last year, some of Carolina's decision, some because coaches left, like Phil Longo, right? But in terms of the powers that be, where that wouldn't come into play is that would only be Mack Brown. The powers that be with any of the rest of the coaching staff is going to be Mack Brown making decisions. I think he's going to need to. I just, we talked about a couple weeks ago on the show, like, I think it might be, I'm a patient wait and see guy. I think it's probably time to get a new defensive coordinator. And I hate to, it grieves me to say things like that because I want to see people stay and succeed. But there just comes a moment where it's probably better for both parties that I think he needs to do that. So to me, this is all about what Coach Brown sees and wants to do. Does he feel like he needs to make a change? If so, we'll see that happen sometime in the next couple weeks and probably after the bowl game if that's going to be the case. All right, folks, that's it for today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels. Thank you so much. If you'd like to submit a mailbag question or video, please do so. You can do that at lockedontarheels@gmail.com or join the Discord and send it in there. We've got a whole mailbag channel. In fact, we got another mailbag question that's coming in through video. It's going to be part of Wednesday's show. Can't wait for you to see that. Please, if you would, go subscribe to the show on video or audio. You can smash the like button to let us know you are here and leave your comments on my thoughts on any of these questions. Would love to hear your answers on them. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be right back together tomorrow, but until then, peace.